Okay, we could go ahead and get started. So I have a small, brief PowerPoint presentation, and then usually I do a little reflection of my own life that I'll do at the end. So on the screen here, I'm showing some images of some gods. And when we look at some of the sculptures, we see Zeus, we see Ra, who's the sun god in Egypt, and then there's Buddha. And then in the corner there, you could see there's the calf that was worshipped by the Israelites during Moses' time. And then you see Christ, and you see these are all images of gods in their most glorified state. And so there's a contrast we see between Christ on the cross dying and then the other gods who are figures of power. Oh, that'll explain it. Okay. Here are some other images of some gods. So these are very familiar faces. These are billionaires. These are people we look up to and idolize quite a bit. And then there's Christ, who doesn't resemble them at all. And the question we ask ourselves is, which one are we most attracted to? And the answer we know is Christ, but truly, who are we most attracted to when it comes to having possessions and positions of power and respect versus being, again, tortured and spat upon and wearing a crown of thorns? Here's how the wealthy travel. And then there's Christ on a donkey. Again, contrast between God and some men that or people that we look up to and aspire to be like. And then this is how the wealthy live. And there's Christ being born in a manger. And this is God. The contrast is striking. I was watching something, and then this Aspire to Greatness commercial came up, and it's in the Ontario Convention Center, and it's to talk about how to be the best you. And it's being brought to you by these, I guess these are very famous people. I don't know who they are, but I guess it's a big deal, and people are constantly looking for ways to better themselves so that they can get more out of life. And then there's a bunch of books on like self-help books or books that are kind of bring an awareness of how you should approach business or how you should approach your own personality and how to fix your personality so that you're more attractive to people. So there's a very famous book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And if you have to read a book on how to make friends and influence people, then there's something fundamentally wrong with you, right? Or your view on friendship and people is a bit distorted. Has anybody ever heard of Stephen Covey? Yeah, everybody's heard of this guy. And at work, our marketing department and our corporate folks, they're always reciting things from Stephen Covey, Stephen Covey, Stephen Covey. And he's become a bit of a god in a lot of businesses. And people look up to him and want to understand his understanding of business and how to thrive. So all this, I think, is really, it comes down to trying to create the perfect you, the sculptured you. And I have a picture of David, or not a picture, but it's a picture of the sculpture of David. And it's revered. Everyone looks at this and they say, what a great image this is. But if you really think of a sculpture, it's motionless. It's finite. It's just a snapshot in time of this moment where David's being portrayed as this like very powerful figure. And in some respect, it's exaggerated, it's manufactured, and it's a representation of who David was. But it's just a moment in time in which he lived, that this was created to depict who this man was really like. And we do this, don't we? Here we have an embellishment of who we are. On the left side, this is the Facebook you, right? And here's a girl who's got the peace sign. She's all about peace and love. It's just trying to show the perfect you. And on the right, this is the LinkedIn you, right? This is what you would put on LinkedIn to show you're very knowledgeable, very professional, very in control, very educated, and why you should be in positions of power. And I actually got those photos from a website that shows you how to pose for LinkedIn photos. So these are a bunch of posers, right? They're literally posing, and they want you to have an image of, an idea of who they really are, all encompassed in one photo, one image. And then there's these folks. And you can see on their face, whether there was a camera on them or not, that's how they looked. And they're not posing. And there's something about them that goes far beyond this image of them. So on this slide, we have to ask ourselves, what are they trying to say about themselves? I showed this to my daughter, and I asked her, what do you think these people are trying to say about themselves? And she said they're boastful. She's 11 years old. She can tell they're very boastful and fake. There's something very artificial about these images. And then when she looked at this, I asked her, what do you think they're trying to say about themselves? And she said, nothing. They're not trying to say anything about themselves, and she nailed it. So my talk today is about aspiring to be nothing. And when I say nothing, it's not self-deprecating. It's not to say I'm nothing, I'm no one, I'm of no value. But it's to really understand the true meaning of nothingness and what comes out of being nothing. And then asking ourselves, well, I'll get into the question later. So Moses, when he saw the burning bush and he asked God, who was he? God responded, I am that I am. And you have to ask yourself, like, what does that even mean? I am that I am. Well, how can that be answered? How can God answer that when he's infinite, when he's eternal, when he's omnipotent, when he's omniscient, when he's omnipresent and imageless? And man, who is very finite, limited, powerless, ignorant, confined, and imaged. How can God explain to man who he is other than I am that I am? That's what I am. That's all that I am. It's like Papa used to say. There's a saying that at work they would say something that I never agreed with, and it's perception is reality. Have you guys heard perception is reality? Do you guys agree with that, or do you have a problem with that? I have a problem with it. And the reason why is there's an argument that I perceive 100% of the things I see. If I can see it, then I perceive it. And if seeing is believing, then everything I see, I believe. Therefore, it stands to reason that everything I see is real. And if I don't see it, it isn't real. So it's very limited, because it implies you have perfect judgment. It implies you have a perfect understanding of all things created. And it implies everyone has similar life experiences like yours. And there's a little cartoon about two guys arguing about what it is that they're looking at. But there can only be one answer, right? There's only one answer. But truth is reality. So there can only be one truth, and there are no alternate truths. Most humans can only see ranges in color spectrum or hear within a range of frequencies. So, for example, most people can't hear a dog whistle because it's outside of the range of frequencies that we can hear, but there's still a whistle being sounded that dogs can hear. Does that mean that there is no sound? There is a sound, we just cannot perceive it. Same with light. So this is an interesting fact I read, is we can only see light, we can only see what light we're able to see. So, I'm sorry, we can only see what light we're able to see. That's right. So the entire rainbow of radiation observable to the human eye only makes up a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. So of all the light we see, 0.4% of the light we see is actually within the light spectrum. So when you think about it, that means that what we see is only 0.4% of what is there. Don't know why it's not advancing. Sorry. So I would call this the perception is reality group, because they're creating an image of themselves that's purely based on perception. But is this who they are really? I mean, how deep do you go when this is the emphasis? When you're trying to show somebody, this is who I am, and you see it as a manufactured image, then their true identity is as deep as their picture. And this, I would say, this is the Truth is Reality group. So they live in truth. So we see a pattern in who God reveals truth to. God favors the weak, the poor, the simple, and the meek. And we can see that in the disciples, we can see that in St. Mary, we can see that with the saints, past and present, and we even see it in Christ. You guys know the story of Moses, the servant of the Lord. So some interesting things I learned about Moses was he had a speech impediment. Did you guys know that? Yeah. He was slow in tongue, is what the Bible says. And so at the time, the Israelites were slaves under the Egyptians, and Pharaoh was threatened by the Israelites because of their population growth, and he was worried about them being able to get too big that they may overthrow the Egyptians. So he ordered that the newborn boys be killed, drowned in the Nile. So Moses' mother, she floated Moses in a basket, and then he was found by an Egyptian princess who adopted him. And so he grew up with the Egyptians, and he didn't know he was not Egyptian. So he's schooled with the Egyptians. He was amongst the royalty, and then he learned eventually that he was a Hebrew, and he watched when he learned that he was Hebrew, and he saw one of the Egyptians brutally beating another Hebrew slave. He lost it, and he killed the soldier that was beating the slave. So he was actually arrested and exiled, and then he settled in the land of Midian, and he was married. And then there's a lot of details I'm skimming over, but he encounters the burning bush, and it's God, and God tells him, "You're going to lead the Israelites out of Egypt." And Moses was like, "I have a speech impediment." He didn't say a speech impediment, but he said, "I can't speak." And God said, "I will speak through you, but I'll send you Aaron with you just so that you could learn how to speak." But eventually Moses learned how to speak and argue for the Lord and for the for the Israelites. But it's interesting that he would pick somebody who obviously seemed unfit for the role. And then there's Gideon, the story of Gideon. Do you guys know the story of Gideon? It's a good story. And I kind of relate to Gideon in a way, because he's God's unlikely choice. So at the time, they started worshiping idols again. They got a thing with idols. And God punished them by handing them over to the Midianites. And the Midianites plundered Israel, and they occupied and impoverished the land, that the Israelites were forced to live into the caves of the cliffs. And Gideon was young, and he was considered the weakest in the tribe of Manasseh, and that was a weak tribe, and he was considered the weakest among that tribe. And an angel appeared to Gideon and said, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." And so Gideon is kind of like, who, me? And God gave him signs, because Gideon was in big doubt that he was, maybe he was dreaming or hallucinating. But God gave him 3 signs that confirmed that he was going to eventually save the Israelites from the Midianites. So there was 135,000 Midianite soldiers in this camp, and Gideon managed to gather 33,000 Israelite soldiers, and it was a 1-to-5, ratio, but they had a fighting chance, they felt. But Gideon asked, "Who of you are scared?" And of the 33,000, 22,000 said they were scared, and they ended up walking away. So now he's left with 10,000 men to fight 135,000. And then God instructed Gideon to walk them to a stream and to drink from the stream. And any of the soldiers that drank like a dog, they were released. So it only left 300 men who drank with their hands that were left to fight the soldiers. So that's less than 1% of their entire army that's left to fight 135,000 men. So the plan was this. They were each going to be equipped with a trumpet, a pot, and a torch. And they were at night going to encircle them around the cliffs that oversaw the camp. And then when Gideon would sound his trumpet, all the other 300 men would sound their trumpet, and the sound would echo in the camp, and they would throw their pots down and then light their torches. And it really scared and created this chaos that the Midianites ended up killing themselves because they didn't know who was friend or foe. They were just killing anybody in their sight. So in the end, the Midianites were defeated. And you ask yourself, well, why would God do something like that? I think it's pretty clear it's because God wants to work with a group that would easily recognize God as the reason why there was victory. And God works with the weak and so that his name be glorified. So it comes back to God saying, I am that I am, but why don't we do the same? What is it about us that we need more than just, I am that I am? So if we look at creation, on a micro level and on a macro level, look at how much we've learned about creation. Look at the number of fish in the sea and the microorganisms and the planets, and how much have we learned and how much haven't we learned. And you can see the humility in God, right? Like if we invented one thing, look at how we go about telling people, look what we invented. And we try to make a big hoopla out of that. And you look at God, who created beyond our understanding, and he's not a braggart about it. And if we understand it or don't understand it, it doesn't matter. I am that I am. I created. And it's for you to enjoy. And if you understand it and discover it, was it yours? Was it yours to discover and claim that you discovered this? Look at it. Look at medicine. Medicine. How many things have we learned about the human body? And a doctor or a group of physicians, they develop a medicine to cure something, and it's a marvelous thing. But did they really create, or did they understand creation a little bit better? So the point I'm making here is truth doesn't boast. Truth is truth. It's kind of distracting. What time is it, by the way? It's 12? I'm supposed to end at 12. Okay, well, I'll be quick about this. So I look at my life, and I'll tell you quickly. My upbringing is a little different in that I grew up very poor. I grew up in a poor family, and my father wasn't a good man, and I grew up being called stupid my whole life. As a child, I was called stupid, and I hated report card day because my sister always got A's, and I always got D's and C's, and I knew that when I got home, I was going to get a beating, and my sister was going to get rewards. And so I was just sort of used to that treatment, and I didn't have a big, strong feeling about who I was. And somehow, some way, I eventually get a little bit bigger and stronger, and I used to get beat up a lot as a kid at school. And eventually I got to a point where I wasn't getting beat up anymore. I was getting strong and big, and I kind of liked being able to defend myself. And I started working on a look of looking intimidating and strong. And people stopped picking on me. And I liked that respect. And but I was still inside a very scared and hurt individual, but I didn't want to be hurt any longer. I wanted a way to have people stop hurting me. So I worked on this hard exterior so that people couldn't hurt me anymore. And if you look at pictures of me during this time, it was always like, I'm a tough guy. And my friends, if you ask them, who I was, they would all tell you he's a tough guy. But I wasn't a smart guy, I was just a tough guy. And I applied to 2 schools, Cal Poly Pomona and UC Irvine. And Cal Poly Pomona sends me a letter saying right away, I'm not accepted because of my grades. But UC Irvine accepted me. And I was ecstatic. I was like, thank God, like what a miracle that is. And so I'd gotten all my classes, and I was about to start school, and then the final transcripts were sent from my high school. And UC Irvine, 2 weeks before school was going to start, said, we're denying your acceptance, your GPA stinks. So of course that really affected, because I already had a very low self-esteem about my grades, and I thought God was giving me something, and then he took that away from me. So I was forced to go to Pasadena City College for a couple of years. And I focused more playing on music. I was a drummer. I always played the drums. And I was playing music, and people started liking the way I played my drums, and I would start playing at clubs in Hollywood, and I started getting attention of girls, and that felt good because in my house, the women in my life, the attention I got from them wasn't very good. So here I am getting now attention that I liked, and I seemed desirable for the first time. But I still wasn't getting anywhere in my life. And so I was going to actually go to the Marines. And my mom didn't want me to go to the Marines. And I told her, Mom, there's nothing for me here. There's nothing for me in this world even, there's nothing for me. And I was talking to this Marine recruiter, and he would come all the time, and my mom hated him because, here's this guy going to take her son away. And my sister at this time, she's going to Berkeley because she had straight A's and she was doing really well. And my mom, I wanted her blessing, and she said, Michael, let's pray one more day, and if you still want to go, you can go, and you'll have my blessing. So I told the recruiter, I'll come tomorrow and I'll sign and I'll join the Marines. I actually wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly for the Marines. And so we prayed that night, and then the next day when the mail came, a letter from Cal Poly Pomona arrived saying, we're accepting you. So I was surprised. They had my application. I guess it was it was pending some, they were waiting for me to fulfill certain criteria, and then somehow, some way, they accepted me. So off to Cal Poly I go, and I don't know what to major in. So I was talking to Archie, and he's an accountant, and he's like, hey, accounting's the way to go. Accounting's for everyone, all right? I'm an accountant. And so I started in accounting. And I did about a quarter of it before I wanted to, like, kill myself. What's that? Well, they have their cross, so. So I decided I wasn't going to do accounting, and so I majored in something called engineering technology, because I was always good with my hands. I could fix things, and I just liked working with my hands. And so I was talking to the counselor, or one of the department leads of engineering technology, and I asked him, what's the difference between engineering technology and engineering? And his response was so, like, it didn't sit well with me. He says, well, we get the stuff done, and they're just a bunch of paper pushers. And he just had this really, like, negative response that I didn't want to spend 4 years focusing on just getting it done. And I felt like if I'm going to get a degree, it should be in engineering. So I switched over to engineering, where all the students in that class already had, like, honors, like AP calculus in high school, and I was algebra. So I had a long way to go before I could even catch up with these brainiacs. And I remembered I was in one of these engineering classes, and I was in the front, always asking questions. And I remember the professor got so annoyed with me that he threw his eraser down in front of everyone and said, when are you going to realize you're not fit to be an engineer? So just, I'm feeling the weight of, my childhood again, like maybe I'm just really, I'm not a smart person. But if it's one thing I'm not, is it's a quitter. I just don't quit. And if you tell me I'm not or I can't, it ignites a certain anger in me that I want to go out just to prove you wrong. So this guy, his name was Professor Izadi, and I felt like this big, and I felt 200 eyes staring at me. And I actually got watery eyes, and I got up and I walked out of the class. And sure enough, I failed the class. But I wanted to take it again. I wasn't going to quit. And the class was offered again by Izadi and this other guy named Zagarian. And everybody knew Zagarian, like you could fall asleep in class and get an A. Like this guy was super easy. But I decided I was going to take it with Izadi again. And the first day of class, you get the syllabus, and then you leave. And as I'm packing up my bag, he comes up to me and he says, Mr. Gerges, we're going to go through this again. And I finished packing my bag up, and I put it on my back. And I went up to him in his face, and I said, not only am I going to pass your class, I'm going to ace your class. And so he was like, we'll see about that. And sure enough, I actually got an A in the class because I was just behind. I was always a slow learner, but once I understood something, then that was it. And so anyway, I ended up graduating, and I became an engineer, and I married Janie, and who would think somebody like Janie would be attracted to a guy like me? And so I look back at my life, and I just feel like I'm very small, and I know my limitations. And God has blessed me. Like the little I put into life, God has given me so much. So I'm married, I'm an engineer, and I started doing really well at work, and I felt like all that hard work is finally like paid off. And really thanking God, and then I had my accident. And it really rocked me to my core because I felt betrayed by God. Like, I've never left your side. I've always been faithful to you. And how could you do this to me? But I can tell you from just the years of being in this chair, 8 years of being in this chair, he's really taught me a lot. And that is, I'm not really an actor in life, I'm a spectator. And I'm watching the world for what it really is. And it's just a lot of distractions. And the world that I thought I wanted to conquer, being an engineer, being professional, being a winner, and seeing that for what it really is, and I no longer want those things. What I really want in life is God. That's the only truth I know now. And it's not that I created truth, it's just that I think I'm living in truth. It's the realization of just how small we really are and how great and large God is. And the less I am of me, the more he is in me. And I prefer that. And I ask all of you, if we know the stories in the Bible and we know the stories of the saints, then why is it that we don't pursue nothingness more? Why do we aspire to be great and not really follow in the footsteps even of Christ himself, who didn't travel in fancy vehicles and didn't live in mansions and doesn't have these like images of him being this mighty figure. If that's God, then who are we to try to pursue this perfect image of who we want people to think we are? And it's really a question for all of us, like to really reflect on how we want to be perceived. And when people see us, do we want them to see us or do we want them to see God? And I think I went a little longer than I should have, but I think you get the point. Does anybody have any points to bring up? Comments? Okay. I don't think so, Henry. Yeah. Henry's always ready to, yeah. Okay, let's stand up and pray.